So I'm saying, can you schedule a meeting with, I mentioned the person, so by 10 p.m. for a daily stand up, so that is where I passed in the question. So let's run it now. Yeah, so and the results coming from the project manager, you can see the final answer, meeting scheduler assistant. Here's the final results coming from it. So it gave us the meeting scheduler assistant, whereby the meeting scheduler assistant actually, pick up it's the only guy that will run the flow. Yeah, okay. So this is telling me like the event has been, created successfully. So I'm going to show you how I actually build this solution. So before we actually dive into that, please subscribe to my channel and also click on the notification bell so you can be aware whenever I drop any video. So let's move right into the video. Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how you can build a multi-agent calendar assistant with CrewAI. So this calendar assistant that we want to build is going to help the user manage their schedule in terms of creating events, checking their availability, and summarizing their event for the day. So if you look at the diagram, this is a visual representation of a calendar assistant, so which actually shows us how different agents work together to handle users' requests. At the top of the diagram, we see a user which sends a request. So the request may be something like schedule a meeting with John tomorrow at 3 p.m. Or it might actually be something like find out if I have an event on Friday. So the request is sent to the manager and the manager delegate the task to the right agent. So, and if we look here, we have the three different agents. We have the meeting scheduler agent, the availability checker, the event handler agent as well. So, and each of these agents, they have a task that is assigned to them. They all have their tasks. Also, there is also a tool which is like a custom tool that we're going to build, which will help each of these agents to carry out their tasks effectively. So for our installation, we're going to install the Google API Python client and some other libraries. So if you look at the installation, we're using UV to install it. So my previous video that I made was on how we can actually set up CrewAI on a machine, and I mentioned a particular tool which is UV. So if you are wondering why we're using UV instead of PIP, please check the video above so you can see how we actually install UV and how you can use it for installing other library. So for the LLM provider, we're going to be using the OpenAI GPT-4 model, which is what we're going to use for the implementation of this project. And also, we also need to get a particular credential, which is what we're going to use to communicate to the Google Calendar API. So I'm going to show you how you can do that on the Google Cloud Console. So you go to your browser, then you type Google Cloud Console, then hit enter. So whenever you get here, you go to the top, so which is here under the project picker. Then you select new projects. So we can call this something like maybe calendar. Yeah, let's call it calendar management crew. Then you click on create. If you have an organization, you can add it to an organization. Then you select the projects. Yeah, so when you're done with that, so you're going to go to the left tab. So where you locate that's the APIs and services. So you click on enable API and services. Yeah, so while you're there, you're going to click on enable APIs and services again. Yeah, so this is where we're going to search for the Google Calendar API. Then we're going to click on enable. So let me type Google Calendar API. Then you select it. Then you click on enable. So after you've enabled it, you click on create credentials. Okay. So then some of the question that is asked here, so you're going to click on user data here. Then click on next. Yeah, so it's going to ask for your application name. So you can just put maybe calendar assistant. So then you put in your email. So here you also pass in your email address here as well. Then click on save and continue. So then it also asks for scope. So even though we don't need it because we're going to use it in our code, so still we can still add some scope. So in case you want to add the scope, you can just search for calendar API. So it's going to show you all the scopes that are under the Google Calendar API. So here I'm going to select the calendar API. So I'll just click on one of those scopes, then click on updates. Yeah, so which is showing below. Then we're going to click on save and continue again. So here's where we select the application type. So we're going to select the desktop app. Then we also give it a name. So you can change this default name. So I'm going to click on create. Yeah, so we can download the credentials that is here. So you can download it, then you click on done. So we've actually set up our credential. So there's one more thing that you need to do so you won't have any error whenever you're trying to gain access to the API. So you go to the this OAuth consent screen, then you're going to click on the audience. So you need to add your email as a test user. So here I'm going to add my email address as the test user. Then I click on save. Yeah, so this is everything that we need to do on the Google Cloud Console. So now we can go to our code and I will show you everything that we did for building the project. So here we're in our project directory. So the client secret file that we downloaded earlier, so I renamed it as credentials. So this is the credential.json file. So this project is implemented as a CrewAI Flow. Then if you go to the source folder, we can see the crews. So we have different crews. Then we also have the tools, and which is our custom tool. And we also have the model. So this model is actually a pedantic model, which is how we structure the task output. So we're going to look at each of these, and I'm going to explain everything. So we go to the crews. So we're going to start with each of the crews. So let's check the assistant crew first. Then let's look at the agent YAML file. So this is where we define each of the agents in our YAML file. So we look here, we have the meeting scheduler assistant. We also have something we call the date interpreter specialist. We also have the availability checker assistant and the event checker assistant. So, and we know like in CrewAI, we need to define something like the role, goal, backstory in our agent or YAML file. And we know like defining this help them know what they need to achieve. So first and foremost, if we look at the meeting scheduler assistant, we define a role for it, we define the goal and the backstory. So where we define under the goal, we let it know like it is the one coordinating anything related to scheduling meetings. So another the backstory, we actually provide some background details that help shape how the agent behaves and interact. So and the same thing we did for the date interpreter specialist, the availability checker assistant, the event checker assistant. So each of them actually have a role, a goal, and a backstory. So we're going to move to the tags.yaml file. So under this tags.yaml file, so we have different tags that is defined for different agents. So a particular agent might have like two tags, or it may have more than that, or might just be a single tags. So the first tags that we have here, we have the meeting crafter tags. So these tags actually belong to the meeting scheduler agent. So if you look at this meeting crafter tags, you can see we have description, which is kind of a bit long, and we define an expected output for this task, and we also define the agent that is handling this particular task. So if you look at the description, we pass in something like if the user question is coming, this is the user question over here. So we also ensure like the LLM provider is using the actual date, because most of the LLM provider is actually cut off at 2022 or maybe 2023 or something. So it's not all of them that knows the current date. So we are passing the current date using Python function, so which is this current date. Then it's going to use the current date and the user question to actually craft out a meeting information. So here now we can see like anything the user send, like okay, let's say the user says schedule a meeting with me with John tomorrow. So it's going to break everything down, whereby it's going to extract a summary for it from it. It's going to extract maybe a location if the user provided anything like location. It's going to also extract the start and end time for that particular event. and also the attendees, which might be John or any other attendees that the user specified. So it's going to define everything. So this is what we did for this particular breakdown. So we gave it like a very important instruction on how it's going to actually break everything down, and also the expected output that we want the agent to output for this particular task. So here you can see under the expected output, we have a JSON object. So which is what we want from the meeting crafter task. So which is what we define under the expected output for the meeting crafter task. So that's everything that is going on under the meeting crafter task. So let's go to the other task. So we have another task that is actually carrying out the scheduling of that particular event. So anything coming from the meeting scheduler task is going to be sent to this particular task. So this is why we have the contest here, which is like the results coming from the meeting crafter is going to be passed along here. So under the scheduler tags, we also provide a very good description. So which is what we wanted to do, which is take the JSON object and actually schedule the meeting. And also we also specify an expected output. So which is for this particular tag. So when it's done with it, we expect to see the summary of the event that's been scheduled, and every other information. So, and we also define the agent that is handling this particular task as well. So now let's go to the date interpreter tags. So the date interpreter tags is actually working for the availability checker and the event checker. So let's say the user asks a question like, what is my availability tomorrow? And the time is not specified. So the agent will just run a background check, check for all the available time on the user's calendar, and it's going to return it. So what the date interpreter task is doing is going to create a start and an end time based on the user's request. So, and the expected output we're expecting here is a JSON object where we have a start and an end time. So now the availability checker task, which is everything we have here. So just like I said, the results coming from the date interpreter task is going to be used under the availability checker. So it's going to take the start and end time to check for availability on the user's calendar. So it's going to retrieve all the available time that that particular user has on their calendar. So now let's move to the event checker tags. So this event checker, what it does is just like, let's say the user has something like birthday coming up, that whatever events that the user has on their calendar. So, and this question is going to be based on anything that the user sent. So this is everything that we have under the tags. So you see the way we define everything, the description, the expected output, and the agent that is handling the tags. Also, if we have anything like a contest, we also define that as well. So we're going to look at the manager crew, and we're going to look at the tags and YAML file, that we have over there as well. So here we just have only one agent here, which is the project manager. So just like the way we define for assistant, so here we define the role, we also define the goal and the backstory. So we define that for the project manager. And if we go to the tags as well, so under the project manager tags, we define all the assistant that is actually working. So, and what we expected it to do is anything that the user sends. So let's say the user says, I want to check my availability next week. So we expect it to return only the availability assistant. So, and the availability assistant is going to pick up that user request. So, which is the expected output we want from the project manager tags. So I've showed you everything that we have under the config file in both. So now we're going to look at the crew file, so which is the Python file. So I'm going to show you everything that is going on there. So let's look at the manager crew first. So under the manager crew, we pass in our config file, which is the agents and tax YAML file. Then, we define our LLM, so where we pass in the GPT-4 model. And here we define the agents. So we use the at agent decorator. So now we are passing the agent from the YAML file. So here it is. We also passing the LLM. So, and the tags, we define the tags as well. And under the crew, we define the crew just like the way we usually define the main crew. So we pass in the agents, we pass in the tags, and we pass in how we want the task to be run, so we did that. So that is everything we have under the manager's crew. So now we're going to go to the assistant crew. Yeah, so under the assistant crew, I'm going to show you everything that is going on here as well. So, just like what we did in manager crew, so we imported the config YAML file. Then we also pass in the large language model, and under the agent, this is for the meeting scheduler agent. So we define each of the agents. So here this is for the meeting scheduler agents. This is for the date interpreter specialist agents. And this is for the availability checker agents and the event checker agents. So we define each of them. Then we also define their tags. So this is the meeting crafter tags, just like the way we specify them in our YAML file. So we also did for the meeting scheduler, and we did for the date interpreter tags, the availability checker tags, and the event checker tags. So we defined everything, over here. So that is everything that we have under the crew. So we're going to go to the tools, and we also going to check other files. So let's check the custom tool. Yeah, so this custom tool, I'm going to explain everything that is going on in here. So the first one, we can see the meeting scheduler tool. But if you remember, like, we download a particular credential.json, which is what we're going to use to gain access to the Google Calendar API. So how we're going to create the event, everything that we're going to do under the calendar API, so it's actually inside our custom tool. So we're going to go through each one after the other. So the first one is the meeting scheduler tool. So we can look at the class, which is the custom tool for meeting scheduler. So under it, we have a function which we use to connect to the Google Calendar API. So where we are using the credential.json file. So if you notice, we also have a scope, which is the scope we use for connecting to the API. And again, there's something which is over here. So this is a pedantic model. This pedantic model is working together with the meeting scheduler tool. So what it does is just like it helps the meeting scheduler tool knows, like, this is how the data that is coming in should be structured, or this is how it actually looks like. So if you are sending in any data that is not in this particular, data type that I define here, is going to throw up an error. So let's look at another thing that we have here. So we define different functions. So if you look at here, we have the past dates. So what we are doing here is we are trying to handle the date. So when it's trying to create an event, so it ensures to use the local time zone for that particular user. So which is where we have the start and end time. So you can see the get local time zone. So, and if you look at the reminders, so these are parameters that we'll send in when we are trying to create the event. So this is another function that we have here. So this is where we actually create the events. And now, so this run is what the custom tool use. All the function that we defined earlier, which is the create event, pass date. So we're going to call everything here, and we're going to pass in our inputs, and then we're going to create the event. So which is everything. So we're going to look at the other tools that we have below. So yeah, so we also have the time availability tool. So this particular tool is actually working for the checking availability on users calendar. So everything that we have under here. So let's see where it stops. So yeah. So this is where we have the run. So everything that we have under this particular class, so everything belongs to the availability checker agents. So we also define a pedantic model for the tool inputs. So you can see we define a start and end, so which is for the data coming in through the tool. So, and the function which is over here, this function is connecting to the Google Calendar API. So just like I said earlier, everything is using the user's local time zone. So if you look at here, so this is how we pass in the result. So, and another thing on how I actually handle everything here is the user can be able to query anytime. This is 2025. You might actually query something like maybe 2026, any dates that they want to query, they should be able to gain access to it on the user's calendar. So then we pass in the results. So here we also have the run, just like I mentioned. ensure you always have the run because that is what the CrewAI custom to recognize, and that is actually what it's used to execute all your functions. So you can call every function that you have, under the underscore run there, then it can run everything for you. So that is everything we have under the time availability tool. So let's check the event checker tool as well. So just like we did, we also define a pedantic model for that too. So this is the event checker tool. So this is where we get the events and everything. So through the Google Calendar API. So we are passing the start and end time as the inputs. So just like the way we handle the time availability, so also for the event, it can also check for any event, based on any dates that the user provided. So let's say the user is asking for what are my events, that are scheduled maybe next year. So anytime that the user provide, it can handle that. So which is everything that we have under this function. So this function is handling all the event thing. So this is where we also call the underscore run. So we call the get event, connect to the API. So before you get the event and all. So that is everything we have under the custom tool. So we're going to check other files and see the code that we wrote in there as well. So we're going to go to models.py. Yeah. So under this file is where we define our pedantic model, so which actually help each of the tags on how to structure the output. So if you look at here, we have the meeting for the meeting crafter. This is for the meeting scheduler and for the interpreter and the others. So any result coming from any of the tags, so it helps them to structure the output. So we also have for the agent selection. So that is what the models.py is doing. So let's look at other file. So we're going to go to the main.py. So remember we're building our project as a CrewAI Flow. So all the crews that we defined earlier, we're going to call them under this flow. So if we look at here, we actually import, the libraries. And also, this is where we call our crew. So also, I want to bring something to our attention, when we are creating the assistant crew. So let's go back to the assistant crew. Remember, like everything that we defined there, we just defined the agent, tags, and the crew has not been defined. So now let's go back to our flow so I can show you what is going on here. So under the main.py, so we defined our calendar states. So this state is actually more like the pedantic model, so which is for the flow. So and we also define the name of the flow, then we pass in the calendar state in, and we define where the flow is starting from, which is the execute manager. Then we also have the listen. So this will wait for the execute manager before it will run. So and also same thing for this. So this also waits for the assistant crew before it actually run. So this is actually where we kick off the flow. So now let's go through each of these so we can see what is going on in here. So let's check the execute manager function. So if we look at what is going here, this is actually where we pass in the current time and date. So then this is actually where we execute the manager queue. So where we're passing the question, the current time and everything. So and from here, what is actually running with is, any result coming from here has to be the chosen assistant. The results coming from the manager crew always will be any of the assistant name, which will be availability assistant, event checker, and the scheduler assistant. The result coming from here is actually what we save inside our states. So we save it under the chosen assistants. So and then we're returning it. So let's go to the assistant crew. So under the assistant queue, you can see this chosen assistant. So we are actually looping through the chosen assistant that we have in our calendar states, which is what we saved earlier. So we are looping through is that we are getting each of all those assistants. So this is the calendar assistant. So we're using this instance to gain access to each of the agents, then also their tags. And I'm going to explain the reason why we did that. So the reason why we did that is because we don't want all the agents to run at the same time. So we just want the specialized agents that that can handle the user's request. So they are the ones that are expected to run. So we don't want all the entire agents to be running at the same time. So that is the reason why we did that. So then what we're going to do here is, based on the result that is coming from the manager crew. So let's say the manager pass something like availability assistant. So it is only the availability assistant that is going to run. So that is how we undo that. So this is actually where we execute the crew. We just pass in the agent, instance, then we pass in the tags, and then we actually kick off the flow. So this is where we run it, pass in the question and the current date. And everything that is coming from there, we saved all our feedback to the states. So we use the response that we defined under the states. So we save that. Then we are collecting all the response from each of the assistants here. And here's where we kick off the flow. So let's run this. We've done a lot of things today. So before we run it, let me show you where we actually pass in the question. So this is where I'm passing my question. So I'm saying, can you schedule a meeting with, I mentioned the person, so by 10 p.m. for a daily stand-up. So that is where I passed in the question. So let's run it now. Assistant flow. So let me activate it back. So let's run the file. So CrewAI Flow kickoff. So it's running it. Yeah, so this is the project manager. Yeah, so and the results coming from the project manager, you can see the final answer, meeting scheduler assistant. So here's the final results coming from it. So it gave us the meeting scheduler assistant. So whereby the meeting scheduler assistant actually, pick up it's the only guy that will run the flow. Yeah, okay. So this is telling me like the event has been, created successfully. Yeah, so that is everything. And this is the summary of what it did. So the meeting has been created. Okay, I think I mentioned the dates that I want that meeting to be scheduled. So I said 10 p.m. today. So, based on my dates, that is 30th, so and 10 p.m. So, and if you notice this result, it is only the meeting scheduler assistants that actually ran. So you didn't see any other agents that came up from it. So, and we are going to confirm the results. So I'm going to go to the email, because the email I specify is actually my other email. I'm going to confirm if that meeting has been created successfully. Yeah, so this is it. No, this was created 2 minutes ago. This is it. So this is telling me like an invitation for me. So and this meeting has been created successfully. It also mentioned the person that set up the meeting, which is what I can see here. So we're going to test with more questions, and we're going to see the performance of this flow. Yeah, so let me just comment this and run the code again. Yeah, so let's check the results. And if you look at the results coming from the project manager, we have the event checker. The question we asked was based on, we said, can you help me check my upcoming event next week and also schedule a meeting, just use that. So, and obviously we expect it to return event checker assistant and the PT scheduler assistant under the project manager. So these are the two assistants that are going to, carry out these tasks for the user. So let's go further to check what is under. So the daytime specialist is actually working together with the availability assistant and the event checker assistant. So any task that is given to the event checker assistant, so this daytime interpretation specialist is meant to run first, so before the event checker. The results coming from here is what we're going to pass to the event checker. So let's see the results coming from here. The event checker assistant. So it's taking the results from the daytime specialist. So yeah, so it actually retrieve all the upcoming events. So this is the entire results. So it tells me like the user has a daily stand up, on June 2nd at 10 p.m. So we asked it like, can you help me check my upcoming event, which is next week? And that's true because June 2nd is actually next week. Okay, said it appeared 3 times in the search results. We're going to check the calendar to verify this if it's actually true. So, because I mentioned next week, so let's see. Yeah, so if you notice next week, this is Monday. Yeah, this is next week calendar. The only thing I have here is actually that daily stand up that I created earlier, so which is on Monday. So, and it is the same results that is given back to us. So we can see the report is actually correct. So the daily stand-up was scheduled on June 2nd, 10 p.m. So, and it was 10 p.m. And it appeared 3 times in the search results, which is true. So there's no reason for the third agent to actually run because the people that are meant to handle these tasks are just the meeting scheduler and the event checker. So the user wants to send something that involves the entire three agents, so it is also going to carry out the same operation. So another thing I want to bring to attention is the fact that we didn't use the process as hierarchy while we are using the manager agents. So the reason why we didn't do that is because I actually noticed like when I do that, it run all the entire agents. So which is not exactly what I'm looking for. So which is why I use this approach. So let's say you want to go for that process as hierarchy, you may decide to use that. So this is the end of this video. I hope this video was very helpful in showing you how you can actually build a multi-agent personal assistant. So if you have any question, please drop them below. Also, please ensure you give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so you can see related video like this. Thanks for watching. I would love to see you next time.